So I was thinking the other day, now yes, that's a very scary thought, but just hold on a second, hear me out here. Remember back in 2019 when all we wanted was Valtteri Bottas replaced at Mercedes? Well, had that happened, his successor wouldn't have been George Russell. He was in his first year of Formula 1 and Toto Wolff had ruled that out. No, instead it would have been Esteban Ocon driving for the Silver Arrows in 2020. And just think about that for a second. How different might Formula 1 be now had that move happened? Hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1, and let's cover a few of these cases, shall we? Let's start off then with that potential move I talked about at the beginning of the video. Having been ousted from Racing Point for daddy's cash at the end of 2018, Frenchman Esteban Ocon found himself without a drive for the 2019 season, opting to instead become the test and reserve driver for the Mercedes Formula 1 team. This got Ocon a few show runs, but no real Grand Prix running, and many doubted whether the Frenchman would ever be able to make it back to the pinnacle of motorsport. You see, Ocon wasn't bad by any means, he just wasn't necessarily proving to be the next Max Verstappen either, though he was very good at pissing him off. However, his good work while at Mercedes, combined with Bottas being typical Bottas, led to many tipping Ocon to become a Mercedes driver for 2020. At the time, George Russell was only in his first season of Formula 1 with Williams, and was still a bit of an unknown quantity in the sport. It was difficult for him to really show what he could do, mainly because his car was a Williams and his teammate belonged in a retirement home. Wolff didn't want to promote Russell that early anyway, but still gave Bottas the German and Hungarian Grand Prix to prove he still deserved to be a factory Mercedes driver. Valtteri would take said opportunity and do this with it. That meant, as we headed into the summer break, Esteban was almost a shoo-in for that seat. However, Mercedes eventually opted to stick with Bottas, finding Ocon to drive at the Renault squad instead. Poor Hülkenberg. So that's what happened in real life, but Ocon has claimed since that he was in advanced talks with Mercedes. So what if he had replaced the Finn in 2020? Well, given how Ocon returned to the Formula 1 grid arguably a far better driver, I think he probably could have had a very successful year had he got that Silver Arrow seat. I doubt he would have been able to make quite the flying start that Bottas did at the start of the year, but over the course of the season, I probably could see him taking the fight to Lewis maybe a little bit more. Now, don't get me wrong, the season would still very much have been between Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton that year. I'm just saying that Esteban might have been, say, 10 seconds back by the flag, as opposed to 25. But what about Valtteri Bottas? Toto Wolff at the time wanted to make sure whoever lost out on the Merc drive still got a good landing spot, and the two candidates for that would be obviously Renault, where Ocon ended up, or Haas. Yeah, that would have been fun. I'll be honest, I think Renault might just have stuck with Hülkenberg in this scenario, with Bottas ending up pairing Magnussen at the American squad. And though in 2019 this might not have sounded like such an awful idea, just think about how that outfit turned out in 2020 and 2021. Bottas would likely have been moved aside like Grosjean was for Mad Lad Maz anyway, just simply because Haas needed the money at that point, meaning a premature retirement or possibly a move into Alfa Romeo a year early. Meanwhile, while I think Ocon would have done a much better job at Mercedes, he'd still be replaced by Russell for 2022. There's no way Wolff's going to pass that opportunity up. So at the end of the day, that scenario doesn't change a whole lot, except maybe Hülkenberg could have got that podium in Sakir 2020. Yeah, actually, I just shouldn't have brought that up, should I? Let's instead move on to a potential driver move with far bigger ramifications. What if Daniel Ricciardo had joined Ferrari? Now, this nearly happened on two occasions, firstly in 2019, then again in 2021. We'll start first with 2019, where in real life Daniel jumped ship to Renault after discovering Helmut Marko's Verstappen shrine and deciding against being a slave for the Dutchman. Out of the two instances where Daniel could have gone to the Scuderia, this one was perhaps more of a long shot, since they had Charles Leclerc in the oven at Alfa Romeo already, and Daniel would likely have only been a stopgap for a year or two until they brought him in. It also mightn't have been a great decision for Daniel either, as though Ferrari were competitive in 2019, they still couldn't take the fight properly to Mercedes. And then when their illegal engines were discovered, everything went to shit. The move in 2021, though, could have had far larger ripples in the F1 timeline, as at this point, Ferrari had ditched Vettel before realising they didn't have anyone waiting in the wings in their junior lineup to replace him, narrowing the shortlist down to Ricciardo and Sainz before eventually settling on the Spaniard. Ricciardo then took Carlos's place at McLaren, and we all know how that went. What if things had gone the other way, though? Well, the Ferrari may have been more suited to Daniel's driving style to how the McLaren was, resulting in him having a much better year than he actually did in 2021. And combining that with Schumacher's struggles gives you a long-term partnership between himself and Leclerc, provided events unfolded in that way, and you've got a very strong lineup going into 2022, where the Ferrari car became competitive, just not anything else. Would Ricciardo have avoided the early season mistakes suffered by Sainz? Quite possibly, and this could have allowed him to take more points away from Verstappen in the long run, giving us a closer championship fight, or just a fight to begin with. Now, that's not at all to take away from Sainz's achievements. He's definitely got stronger over the course of the season, but him staying at McLaren could have had impacts as well. Firstly, with the team firing on all cylinders, they might have had a much stronger 2021, and the fight for third between themselves and Ferrari could have been a lot closer than what we eventually got. I'd also be interested to see if we'd still end up in this whole Piastri contract drama, and how much bigger the fallout would be between McLaren fans if it did. As always, let me know your thoughts on these down in the comments, but before I go, let's cover one more, and it might be one that some newer fans haven't heard of. I want to take you back to 2009, which wasn't too dissimilar to today really, since there was contract drama and Fernando Alonso was at the heart of it. This time it would all take place at Ferrari, with Alonso coming in, and the team realising how bad it would have looked to sack Massa off after his crash in Hungary. Kimi Raikkonen had to be moved on somehow. In the end, the settlement was agreed where the Scuderia would pay Raikkonen off, but if he wanted all the cash, he couldn't sign with another team on the grid for 2010. Thing is, he very nearly did, discussing with Red Bull how he could replace Mark Webber at the team, and though we don't know all the reasons why this fell through, looking back at another potential driver move might provide a good theory. 1 year later, the rumour mill pointed Lewis Hamilton towards Milton Keynes, which is another move I should really cover. Let me write that down. Christian Horner spoke about this quite recently, claiming the reason things didn't go too far was due to Red Bull not wanting to have two alpha drivers at the same time. Yeah, this hurt as a Webber fan. Anyway, you can guess it was a similar story when Kimi came calling, as Sebastian Vettel was proving to be the next big thing after taking the outfit's inaugural win in China 2009. In reality, Kimi would still race with Red Bull branding, but in the WRC Rally Championship until his return to F1 with Lotus in 2012. But what if he had partnered Vettel instead? Well, this could be controversial, but I think Kimi could have taken that championship in 2010. Vettel's title run that year arguably was one of the worst out of his 4 years dominating the sport, and he only really picked up form in the final quarter of the season. Even going into that final race, Vettel hadn't led the championship at any stage, and came in behind Alonso and his teammate Mark Webber. Now, assuming that in equal machinery, Raikkonen is a better driver than Webber, which I don't think is too wild of a statement, you can see now why I see him ending the year on top, can't you? What happens beyond that point is very, very difficult to predict, though I'd imagine the Vettel camp wouldn't be particularly pleased about the whole thing. Could that see him make a switch earlier than 2014? Quite possibly. Then you end up with a scenario where Vettel might not have won any titles at all. But this just highlights the fun with predicting each of these, and in reality we've only covered 3 of hundreds of different possibilities if you search hard enough. Hey, Pastor Maldonado nearly went to Ferrari in 2014, and I've made a video on that already, so there's a link in the top corner if you want to check that one out. But let me know what you think of my predictions here, and whether you could see things turning out differently. Head down to the comments below and I'll try and get involved where I can as well. And give me some suggestions for some more driver moves to cover. If this does well, I'm more than happy to do a part 2. Finally, before I go, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And a huge thank you to all my patrons for supporting the work I do. If you want to get involved in any of that or just check out any of my other socials, the links are down in the description below. Anyway, that's all from me. I'll see you soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.